The Stranger I Met, written by Eberechukwuu, Folktale Therapy. The memories of my marriage still linger in my mind like a bittersweet melody. I met my husband under unusual circumstances. I entered his private car thinking it was a taxi, and we became fast friends. He was charming, handsome, and older than me. We started dating, and despite our age gap, I was drawn to his good looks and charismatic personality. Months later, he visited my house with his younger cousins, who professed their love for me and asked for a close relationship. After I finished writing my WAEC, he proposed to me, and I was torn. But then, a fair, pretty lady visited me at his house, introducing herself as his lover. She warned me about his intentions, telling me he would never marry me and was only using me. My curiosity got the better of me, but my husband-to-be convinced me she was just a bedmate and nothing more. Despite my reservations, we got married, and I became pregnant with our first child. The bride price wasn't paid, but we had a big wedding when I was 8 months pregnant. After our son's birth, the bride price was paid, and my husband's true nature began to show. He was controlling, arrogant, and violent, often beating me over small things. I would run to my father's house, seeking refuge. Despite the challenges, I loved my husband, his siblings, and his town. His father, however, treated me like a goddess, and his love humbled me. I struggled to balance my studies, working as a teacher in a private school to support myself. The experience was grueling, with long hours and meager pay. However, years of our marriage were a rollercoaster ride of emotions. My husband's behavior was a mix of loving and caring, but also volatile and violent. The beatings and quarrels became more frequent, and I often found myself running to my father's house to escape the abuse. Despite the challenges, I was determined to pursue my education and become independent. I juggled my studies, teaching in a private school, and taking care of our children. It wasn't easy, but I managed to earn my OND, diploma, and degree. The experience was grueling, but I was driven by the desire to create a better life for myself and my children. My husband's behavior didn't change, but I learned to cope and adapt. I realized that his violent outbursts were a reflection of his own struggles and insecurities. When his father passed away, I received a call from my husband, and I was devastated. His father had been a source of comfort and support for me, and his loss was a significant blow. During the burial, tensions ran high, and I was advised not to bring my children due to the distance and potential hostility from his family members. I heeded the advice, but things didn't go smoothly. A confrontation with his senior sister left me reeling. She slapped me for speaking my mind, and it was a wake-up call. I realized that the violent behavior might be a trait that ran deep in their family, and I began to prepare myself for future conflicts. The experience shaped me into the strong woman I am today, and I'm determined to protect myself and my children from any further harm. The Stranger I Met continue in Part 2. The Stranger I Met, written by Eberichukwu, Folktale Therapy. After my father-in-law's burial ceremony, I returned from the village with a mix of lessons and shocking revelations. My husband was still upset about the slap his sister gave me, but the lady in question seemed unfazed. However, one early morning, my sister-in-law sent a wrapper as a gift to me. A woman that see herself as God in the family. She was indirectly asking for forgiveness. Alas, I said, finally, out of pride she did this. The gift came with silent message, no word, no apology, just the wrapper. What a pride! My husband's family had taken my age as a weakness, exploiting it to abuse me. They never knew I will ever stop to conquer. It was as if my silence spoke volume. Unknowingly to them my silence was a sign of strength, not submission. Though my husband eventually realized his mistake and pleaded with me to forgive him, but his violent behavior persisted. His father's words echoed in my mind, "Forgive your husband, my wife, and don't make your wife a punching bag." My father-in-law warning and calm word echoed in my subconscious mind, "Forgive your husband, my wife, and don't make your wife a punching bag. She is meant to be your friend and not a punching bag." My husband will always respond, "Sorry Dad, I will not try that again," but I know he wouldn't stop because he had hit the father when he was younger. My experience during my father-in-law burial ceremony kept me abreast of the family history of domestic violence. Most times, I don't blame my husband, James, because he had weak parental background. He was not trained by the mother. The mother died immediately he, James, was born. James was taken to the motherless baby home 3 days after his birth. What a tragic scenario. The nature of James' training at the motherless home made me ignore and forgive most of his negative behavior. James regularly displayed conduct unbecoming of a gentleman. His behavior is shocking and unsuitable for me, but I keep managing until one day I came back from school and met a strange woman in my house. "Who are you, young woman?" Her response was glaringly obvious. She was giving a room by my husband, from our 3-bedroom flat. The couples paid James to occupy the space without my consent. "Caro, where is your husband?" I asked. "He is not my husband but my boyfriend." Caro was pregnant but hiding it. My flat neighbor, who was an elderly person, already told me that Caro is pregnant. "Caro, how are you?" my husband will always ask. I noticed her closeness to my husband, which sparked my curiosity. When I confronted Caro about her relationship with my husband, she revealed a shocking truth. James was sleeping with his cousin Neoma, a young girl who normally comes around to help with household chores. "Pretty," she called me. "You are living with a total stranger." Still difficult to understand. I hunched, sniffing like a child. "What do you mean, Caro?" I asked. She sat on a bare floor, flapping her fingers. I was curious, shouted at her, Be straightforward. I'm losing my mind, James. Your husband sleeps with his cousin's sister Neoma. I was thinking loud but completely lost, still gaping stupidly at her. Caro. What did you just said? Yes. You had me right. He is sleeping with Neoma. Neoma was a little cousins of my husband who always come around to help in the domestic work because I had no house help. A little tiny girl with no flesh, Caro continue. Neoma will always come to ask me of pain relief drug every morning after sleeping with him. But I noticed she always disappear from the house each weekend you comes back. I tried to link it up with the story my husband told me one day I visited home. Pretty. Your mother accused me of infidelity. Because I was naive and younger then, I went and confronted my mother, not realizing I was defending a monster. Alas. Early marriage has its bitter truths. It was a harrowing experience I endured. Domestic violence entwined with infidelity, a heart-wrenching reality I faced. But I chose to endure, until one fateful morning, when everything was about to change. Episode 3 Loading. The Stranger I Met 3. Written by Eberichukwu, Folktale Therapy. When everything was about to change, it seemed as if James had repented of his violent behavior. But then he displayed the worst of it all. My first son, Solomon, is stubborn but full of zeal for education and very hardworking. One day, James warned him sternly. Solomon, I don't want to see you outside the house when you return from school. Yet Solomon would always play on the staircase with his peers. The moment he saw his father approaching, he would run inside. One fateful afternoon, Solomon was busy, as usual, playing on the staircase. He jumped from one step to another, shouting and yelling. Solomon! His father barked. What are you doing? Solomon stood there, staring blankly. James ran inside the house, came back with a long slim cane, and began flogging him. With the strength of a child, Solomon grabbed the cane. Without remorse, James tried to snatch it back by force. In the struggle, the cane struck his eye. What a big blow! Raging in anger, my husband James stormed into the kitchen, which was close to the staircase. He grabbed a kitchen knife and struck Solomon on the head. Blood gushed out immediately as Solomon cried. James showed no regret. Instead, he forced Solomon to clean up the blood on the floor. Solomon, knowing what his father was capable of, obeyed and began cleaning. Just then, my neighbor's son, Chuka, stormed in. What is wrong with you, Solomon? He asked. Solomon, with tears in his eyes, could barely speak. Solomon! Chuka screamed. What happened? Solomon pointed at the kitchen knife lying on the gas table. What about the knife? Chuka pressed. Daddy, he hit the knife on my head, Solomon managed to say. Chuka stood there, shocked. He did this to you, and still asked you to bend and clean the blood. Without wasting time, Chuka rushed Solomon to a nearby private hospital, where he was treated and later brought back home. By the time they returned, James had gone to his usual drinking spot. What a cruel father! Without conscience, without fatherly love. When I came back that evening, Solomon was already in a deep sleep. Chuka narrated the whole story to me. I was sad, depressed, and angry. I later took Solomon to a nearby photo studio, shaved his head closely, snapped him and left. James came back home very late that night, drunk. No words, no remorse, no apology, he simply went straight to bed. The following morning, he bathed and left as if nothing had happened. It was a terrible ordeal that has refused to leave my subconscious mind till this very moment. That incident prepared me for even bigger troubles ahead. A man who could treat his first child in that manner could one day kill his wife. My reason. The child is his blood, but the wife is just his partner. James is kind and good-looking but hot-tempered. He can give all he has and start begging the next minute. Tell me of a man who is hard-working, kind-hearted, and compassionate, yet lustful, arrogant, and full of rage. I will mention James Okoro. I actually wanted to quit the marriage, not by choice but out of fear. His rage was uncontrollable. I kept praying for him, hoping to see a change. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. I had my third child, and later my last, 3 boys and a girl in total. I thought he would turn a new leaf after building such a blessed home. Alas! He grew worse. His friends were his nightmare, terrible, wicked, and bad friends who influenced him negatively at every opportunity. James is tall and handsome. Though uneducated, he surrounded himself with educated people, lawyers and politicians. When I had my last baby, my mother came for Omugwo and witnessed a terrible scene between James and me. He hit me as though I were his fellow man, with no regard for the presence of his mother-in-law. My mother picked her belongings and left the house. But where exactly did she go when she left? And what did James do after she was gone? The Stranger I Met continues in Episode 4. Episode 4. The Stranger I Met, The Bitter Taste of Marriage. Written by Eberichukwu. My mother left my house and went straight to our family home. With a heavy heart, she told my father and siblings what she had witnessed in my marriage. The Omugwo she came for, meant to be a season of joy and bonding, turned into heartbreak and futility. What should have been a time of excitement was instead a bitter pill. From that day, she often looked at me with pity, shedding tears in secret over the things she had observed in my home. Yet my family could do nothing. We were financially bankrupt, and as a Catholic Christian family, especially my mother, it was difficult to imagine pulling me out of my marital vows. I had undergone both the traditional and religious ceremonies. All the marital rites had been paid, and James had agreed to the conditions set before marriage. He had seemed so desperate, so completely devoted to me. But the man I saw after the marriage vows were exchanged was unrecognizable, a stranger I could not reconcile with the love he once professed. Marriage is not for the weak, my mother would always remind me. It requires prayers, understanding, dedication, commitment, and perseverance. But oh, dear readers, it was a terrible experience. To step into marriage with naivety and immaturity is one of the greatest mistakes anyone can make in life. I was still young and not very easygoing myself. Reckless at times, I did not care what would happen the next second. I was always ready for James's troubles, never minding the consequences. What did I know, really? Our marriage was full of storms, endless quarrels, fights, bickering, deceit, and negative influences. Because James was uneducated, he was easily manipulated by his friends. Any agreement we had reached during the day would vanish after he spent time with them. He would return home with a hardened heart, controversial and unstable, revisiting old arguments we thought were settled. I resisted him often, for I knew his decisions were not from a place of good conscience but poisoned suggestions designed by his friends to ruin my career and peace of mind. After the Omugwo saga, however, I grew a tough skin. I vowed to make progress in life, no matter the odds stacked against me. James's daily routine was predictable: eat, do his small business, drink to stupor, and return late into the night. He preferred the company of his side chicks and miscreants in beer parlors, drinking like fools, making pointless political arguments, and shouting over irrelevant matters. What a shame! A father emotionally and physically absent from his own children. When he did show interest in the children, it was with the iron hand of an army officer punishing offenders. His voice thundered, his movements were frightening, and his punishments were brutal. My son Solomon and his siblings often forced themselves to sleep before his arrival. The fear was unbearable. I would not wish such an experience on even my greatest enemy. Loneliness became my closest companion. I began visiting prayer houses, seeking solace, making new friends, and preparing for the uncertainties of tomorrow. One bright morning, I visited a prophet with my elder and younger sisters. "Young girl, you are married?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied softly. "You didn't inquire about the man before marrying him," he said. His words pierced me. I had nothing to say. He continued, "Notwithstanding, you're born for greatness. Listen carefully. Your education is the most important part of your destiny." I stared in dismay, my heart heavy with doubt and confusion. "Yes, my daughter," he insisted, "if you must succeed in life, you must climb the ladder of academics." At that moment, I remembered James's promise to my parents. When he came to seek my hand in marriage, my mother had said firmly, "James, my daughter must go to university if she marries you." He had agreed without hesitation. Clinging to that promise, I enrolled in a diploma and later a degree program. I struggled through, but by God's grace, I secured a job in a mission school after my youth service. During my 3-week orientation camp, banking was still underdeveloped, so I kept all my allowance in a small box. When I returned home, James demanded the money. I resisted. That evening, he beat me mercilessly, twisting my head and shouting, "Give me that money before I kill you here." But I held my ground. At that stage of my marriage, I had grown stubborn, adamant, even shameless in my resistance. His intimidation no longer frightened me. In a desperate act of defiance, I smashed all the bottles of beer he had packed. Startled, James ran out of the house like a coward, jumped into his car, and sped away. But he was unpredictable. I didn't know what he might do when he returned, so I fled to a friend's house nearby. I whispered to Solomon, my first son, to call me once his father had gone to bed. Solomon was only 10, yet he bore the brunt of my marital storms. He witnessed my tears, my fights, my shame. Each time James and I quarreled, Solomon cried until his eyes swelled. To make matters worse, James would abuse him, calling him all sorts of names. "You are a stupid boy, Solomon. Look at your head, just like your mother's. You are a foolish son." The words tore my heart apart. What an embarrassment, what cruelty, to an innocent child. Still, I consoled him. "Don't worry, son. Dry bones shall rise again." And Solomon, with tearful eyes, would always ask, "Mom, when?" He had 3 younger siblings, who would huddle together on one chair, crying silently, each time their father's rage thundered through the house. One night, when James was fast asleep, the children gathered around me. "Mom," they whispered, "let's run away. Let's go to a far place where Dad will never find us." Tears burst from my eyes. What a life! Misery, fear, emotional blackmail, and sorrow. I urged them to sleep until morning. But when I entered their room at dawn to wake them for school, my heart froze. The room was empty. I rushed to the kitchen door. It stood wide open. "My children! Where are my children?" I screamed, my voice cracking like a child's. To know where they were, dear readers, you must follow up into Episode 5, The Stranger I Met. Episode 5, written by Eberechukwu. The door had been locked properly, the key hanging in its usual place. Yet Solomon, clever and determined, dragged a kitchen chair across the floor, climbed onto it, and retrieved the key. Quietly, he opened the door and slipped out with his brothers and sister trailing behind him. Where could they run at such an hour? Straight to my neighbor Fidelia's house. Solomon knew I was on good terms with her. Once inside, they poured out their fear in shaky voices. They could not return home. If their father, James, woke in the morning, his anger would burst forth again, fresh and cruel. Fidelia listened with a heavy heart. She urged them gently to go back, promising to speak to us as parents in the morning. But Zane, my second son, broke down. "I will not go back, Auntie. Daddy will be mad at us." His cries tore the silence, and Fidelia found herself at a loss. She knew James too well. Quietly, she descended the stairs, shut my kitchen door, and returned to her room, leaving the children to rest. At 5 a.m., my alarm rang. Giringiri, I jumped from bed and hurried to boil water for the children's baths before school. I placed the kettle on the gas and began to sing, filling the house with worship. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceaseth. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord, great is thy faithfulness. The song ended, but the silence remained. None of the children stirred, none rushed into the kitchen as they usually did. Alarmed, I called, Solomon NNMM, no answer. My chest tightened as I ran to their room. Sarah, my teenage cousin, lay fast asleep, oblivious. She was too young to intervene in family matters. Heart pounding, I dashed to the kitchen door. It was closed but not locked. With trembling hands, I pushed it open. Where are my children? My voice cracked through the early morning stillness. Fidelia had been waiting. She emerged from her flat above mine, her face calm but her eyes heavy. Eberichukwu, Mama Solomon, come upstairs. She held me tightly and whispered, I know why you're shouting. Your children are here. Anger and relief twisted inside me. Why didn't you call me when they came? I demanded. She chose her words carefully, unwilling to offend. Her silence felt like distance. I stormed into her flat and found them there, my children, sitting quietly on the bed, their small legs stretched out, faces weary but apologetic. Mummy, we are sorry, Solomon whispered. Fidelia explained softly. They cried after you went inside. Zane and Grace clung to me. I had no choice but to take 'em out. I sank to the floor, my tears spilling freely. What kind of life is this? Children, innocent and deserving of joy, were living as fugitives in their own father's house. Instead of warmth, they were learning fear. Instead of laughter, they carried sorrow too heavy for their years. By 6:30, we were late. I hurried through their preparations, but there was no time for lunch. With nothing to my name, I went to James for money. His response was as cruel as ever. Go and collect their lunch from Fidelia, he sneered. He even hinted they could spend nights there, as though mocking me. I swallowed my anger, ignored him, and dug out a few coins from my bag for their school snacks. That morning, I walked them to school myself. They were fragile, and I could not risk sending them alone. At Grace and Daniel's school, they clutched my hands tightly. Mummy, stay with us until we dismiss, so we can go home together. Why? I asked gently. So Daddy won't beat you again, Grace whispered. Their words pierced me deeper than any blade. I bent down, kissed their cheeks, and promised, I will be fine. I won't enter the house until I see him drive away. Only then did they release my hands and walk inside, glancing back with worried eyes. On the way home, my thoughts churned. How do I stop this madness? How much longer can we live like this? I resolved quietly, I will avoid his presence at all costs. But James was already at Fidelia's, his voice rising like thunder, accusing her falsely, trying to drag her into his chaos. I recognized the pattern. He wanted to silence her because she often warned him against his violence. Hearing his rage from the staircase, I hid under the stairs until he finally drove off. Then I slipped into Fidelia's flat, apologizing for the shame he cast on her. She told me of the night my children endured. Solomon and Zane did not sleep. They whispered prayers, asking God not to let James kill you one day. My tears burned but did not fall until I reached my room. Then they came like rain, hot and unstoppable. I lost my appetite. My body was restless. Sleep abandoned me. By 3 p.m., Solomon and Zane returned from school alone. "Where are Grace and Daniel?" I asked. "Mom," Solomon said quietly, "they refused to follow us." "Why?" Grace said they'll stay with their school mummy for this week, Zane murmured. Shame washed over me. I hurried to the school, only to be told by the gateman that the school mummy had taken him home. Her house was close by, so I went there immediately. She welcomed me but motioned for silence. "Don't wake them," she said softly. There they were, my children, fast asleep on her couch, still in their uniforms, faces innocent and exhausted. She led me into her room and spoke to me with the tenderness of a mother. "Please, for the sake of your children, avoid anything that will lead to fights at home." They begged to follow me. They told me they don't want to live with their father anymore. Her words were heavy but true. My shame grew, yet I listened. She spoke for half an hour, urging me to protect my children. I promised to change. That night, I took Grace and Daniel home after they awoke. From then on, I learned to live quietly, avoiding James's fury. I devoted myself to the children, their schooling, meals, homework. In the evenings, I often slipped out to visit an old classmate nearby, just to breathe freely for a few hours. Even when James returned drunk, spoiling for a fight, I would quietly sneak out until the storm passed. The days were heavy. Sorrow pressed against my chest like a weight. Old wounds reopened, yet I remained standing. Strong, though scarred. Pain had carved me, sorrow had shaped me. They had not destroyed me, they had formed me. And in that strange, bitter way, I had grown stronger. For a few weeks, peace lingered. But when we returned from a burial in the village, it was gone. Sarah, my cousin, stood at the staircase with her bags packed, tears in her eyes. "What is it, Sarah?" I asked, my heart already breaking. She would not answer. I pulled her inside, pleading through my tears. "Why do you want to leave, Sarah? What have I done to you?" Finally, she sobbed out the truth. My mother asked me to pack my clothes and return home. Why? I asked again, trembling. She cried harder, unable to speak. Then James entered, cold and calculated. Sarah, tell her your reasons, he said flatly, before walking out. The room grew heavy with silence. Slowly, Sarah began to narrate her ordeal. Episode 6 loading. Please, readers, read, share and follow my page.